Welcome to everyone. Let's go right in and talk about the elephant. I don't know if I have a slimmer of good news to share, and there's some things we can talk about this. Both sides are returning to the negotiation table, the bargaining table tomorrow. That was a communication I got from the union this morning, so that they are heading back to the bargaining table. No agenda set from either side. And the union says, quote, if real progress is being made, then we are willing to extend the strike deadline. And so we wait at this point. So I don't want to weigh in too much about this or that because I'm not an expert on the issues or what's going on or anything like that. But I do approach this as like game theory, like what happens if this moves or that moves. And the strike deadline being issued at 12:01 tomorrow was an effort to unstick the stuck negotiations. And if they're returning to the table tomorrow, that's a positive sign. We did have a story I vetted on Humber News yesterday about the minister saying, they want to see both sides get back to negotiation. This is a common development you see in labor negotiations, that the calling of a strike deadline gets both sides to start talking again. Doesn't mean they'll arrive at anything. And there's been back and forth. He said, she said, she said, going on over the issues of whether an issue of workload can be settled, given that there's Bill 124, which is a bill that limits all pay increases out of austerity for Ontario public servants. And of course, college faculty fall into that category there as well. So at least it's good news that they are talking again. Whether it amounts to anything, a couple things will likely happen tomorrow. And I've been in this at CBC with negotiations where the night of, leading up to the 12:01 can be stressful. And I will admit I got together with colleagues and killed their one or two brain cells as we waited for the news to come out. And tomorrow is St. Patrick's Day, but I'm just saying. Uh, we'll likely have some sense of how the talks are going. If the two sides come in and that's obviously not going to do anything, the union will certainly make it known that it intends to. We'll know by midday-ish, certainly I would think by 6, whether there will be a strike. If talks are ongoing, we'll take that as a good sign that maybe they'll say, back to school. So long story short, be prepared to do your radio scripts for Kim's class. Expect an update from Kim regarding what she's planning to do there. You may have already seen it in your email as well. The class isn't canceled unless, of course, all classes are canceled. So that is going on. Does anyone have anything they want to raise or talk about, or my thoughts on what might happen through this, or what this means for other things?
If something does happen and it does go on strike, will we still have access to Blackboard and everything like that?
I believe you will still have access to Blackboard. You still have access to the campus. You still have access to coming in and signing out equipment. And there will be support staff like Marley, if you've dealt with her, or Judy Boston, will still be in there in a different union, so they'll still be there as well. There will be a picket line set up, and if you've ever dealt with a picket line, normally they talk about picket line etiquette, which pretty much just means you acknowledge it. Maybe if you want to be like, you ask permission to pass. I doubt that if there's several hundred students coming into campus to do that as well. It's considered bad etiquette to just like and muddle past it there as well. You don't have to join it. You don't have to do anything. Just don't sneak around it necessarily. But it is okay to, as they say, cross a picket line. It's not the effort to prevent students from coming onto the campus. And the two sides have already worked out negotiations. Striking faculty can use the washrooms on campus if they want to, so they're not going to litter it with porta potties and things like that. So they're like, it's mature. So that's what's happening. You might see picket lines. I hear they're nicer on the Lakeshore campus, but you'll still be able to come to campus and access things. It's just faculty-led courses won't be going on. You'll notice that on Blackboard, with the exception of today's the assessment of the discussion group. I've taken your marks off, so things were there. So you should have had a sense from me last week in terms of where you are in your midterm. Most of you can add 5 to that, or of course, it was a weighted average, so you have to figure that average out. But the discussions were very good if you contributed to it. That's to give you a sense of where you are, and most of you are all in good shape with this course. So the grades aren't on Blackboard, but all the other resources are on there. The links and other things and details about assignments will still be on there.
Also, if there is a strike and it goes on,
Yeah.
how will that work for things like assignment deadlines and stuff? Is that
Uh-huh.
pretty much paused and then that'll just be moved
Yeah,
along,
yeah.
or
Pretty much pause and move on. What I can say if I what'll ha- if I was to think what might happen, and this is just me not knowing anything. I have not talked to anybody about this things. The timing of this is strategic in that we have a provincial election coming up, and it is not in anyone's interest to ruin your school year and have upset students and upset parents of students, pox in both your houses all over the place. The legislature sits until the end of April, but by the start of May, it's all dissolved. The writs are issued, and we go into an election. So there's like 2-3 week period for things to fester. If no negotiations or anything happen before, I think you would look at some sort of back to work legislation just to put this away. It might lead to binding arbitration, which is what the union is looking for. It might not go to that, but in any case, probably 2-3 weeks is my estimation. If it's not, then all cards are on the table. Who knows? What that would mean is if we go to the regularly scheduled programming. So here we are. We would lose out on March, that second week. So what are we talking about? Like after Easter coming back, they would probably extend, of course. So probably looking at 3 intense weeks. This is me game theory. I know nothing. But what likely happen is we come back and we have to figure out how to, in all the missing weeks, meet the basic learning objectives of the course and come up with more realistic plans for you getting your assignments and things in. I know for this class, by the end of today, you will have had everything I would have to mark to get out with it, and you'll have everything you need for most of that mark. But even if didn't, so I will have nothing else to add when we come back. It'll be relatively doable with this. I don't think any plans would go past that April because we've got the summer course to come on. They might push it back a little week. There might not be that break. We've got a bunch of students who are starting summer jobs in May, so it adds real issues, and there's some of that pressure that's playing into there. That's a bit of the calculus that I'm thinking is going on in there. But that's me just talking. Please don't quote me. I should say that beforehand. You don't say you're off the record and then retract it after the fact. But that's just me thinking, but I don't know anything. Is that useful, or that is just me based on what I've seen other things. In the last election, the last rather strike, it was 5 weeks, but it happened in the fall, and they extended classes into the winter semester a bit and shortened it, and students also had over the Christmas break to get caught up on some things. We don't have as much flexibility, and we also have summer jobs coming up that have to be dealt with. So these are some of the, like I say, game theory negotiation ploys back and forth on this, but that's just me talking off the top of my head.
so since we get most of our updates about this stuff from our teachers and stuff during
Yeah.
classes and things. So while this is going on, will we be getting updates on how it's going or what it looks like? Could happen to plan ahead or just whenever it's
Yeah.
done, we just come
Uh,
back.
we aren't allowed to communicate with you while on strike.
Mhm.
That said, you know my personal website, and it's not that hard to figure out a personal email. But technically, I'm not supposed to communicate with you, and I'm not going to be doing anything a major thing. If you have concerns, the Associate Dean, Sarah Jane Greenway, is the person you speak to about things. Assignments will still be up there, but I can't help you with an assignment. Internships still going ahead, and with that, what was your point? You were saying, so no communication, nothing there.
Just, how will we get updates on how the strike is going or
Updates
when
from
we can
there.
come
The
back?
college will still be emailing you its side of updates. Then there are social media feeds for OPSU and the union to I don't know to what degree they. If you haven't been getting email updates from OPSU, I don't know if you'll be getting ones going forward. But it's would be checking with social media, checking in on the lines, checking just regular news coverage of this if it happens. Um,
I guess that means I'll have to just start watching the news.
oh,
That
geez,
sounds.
imagine that. Yeah. It's been limited. CP24 was on campus yesterday doing some coverage there. Uh, the one thing I could mention is the long history of a strike paper. And this is something that Marley is willing to set up. Back in 2017, she helped some enterprising students set up their own independent news site so that they could, on their own time, contribute some papers, some writing, cover it themselves, write some other articles they were working on, get it published. And what we did was at the end of it, that was looked at and contributed to figuring out what the marks are. Now, this can work for some second year students, some third year students who still have some writing credits that they need for some of their courses as well. And this could be something. I don't know if Rob has talked about it. I know Tim has been
Yeah.
involved with it, and maybe Tim can fill us in on that because we can still communicate with. See, we cannot tell you to do this, and there's no expectation that you have to do this. But we are doing what we can to support you and saying at the end of this, we can take a look at writing that happens on that for multi-platform production for some of the other courses. But Tim, do you have anything to share?
Yeah, I sent a message to the group chat.
Okay.
I've just because I talked to
Old
Rob
news.
and got some with Marley and a few of the people from the second and third year classes just about all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So we're still figuring it all out right now. It's like, but if anyone is interested in writing for it or editing or being involved in any way, I sent my email in the group chat. Just send me an email or send me a message.
Okay. And just once I just had a chat come in, I just need to respond. Okay. Um, yeah. So there's that, and we will wait and see. And there's as good a chance that we will have class Friday as we don't at this point, given that negotiations are going on, and it is entirely possible that that could happen there. If there is class next week, one thing I do need to say is I'm just confirming Bruce Celery for next week. We might have to have that a bit early, like right after Lara's class, or talk to her a little bit early about coming because she's done what at 11:30.
I think next week she said, well, if we do have class,
Yeah.
that it'll be just like a work period for us. So we won't. I don't even think we're actually gonna have an actual class next week.
Okay. Okay. So if we have class, I know Bruce is actually he does a regular radio show or hit or something at 1 o'clock every day. So we need to squeeze him in before then. So if we have class next week, and here's hoping, I'll send a note around and maybe we can plan for something at 11:30, 11:45. We'll hear from Bruce for about 45 minutes. And then we can maybe, you can stick around. We can talk about strategies for the summer. I can talk a little bit about that, especially I want to mention something to keep in mind if you're doing any planning for um, stories you're tracking. I've shared this before. This idea of having a folder or a big planning document, and I want to drop into chat what I have set up to for working with the third years. I have a let me show you March. This is just an idea file we do for more. So March 15th, more student reactions, pop-up stories. We're just tracking story ideas as they come along. What's happening next week? Skip ahead. City council meetings, ideas for stories. Here's what we'd come up with before. It's an incredibly useful thing you should be doing personally to help track your own stories, even collectively, as you track things going on. So when we heard that Zelensky was going to address Parliament last week, I went straight into the Tuesday file and wrote a note, like, make sure we know about this, knowing for planning about this. I want to drop on chat just it's not rocket science. It's just a simple Word doc I created, and this is April Ideas. It even has the links to the Brampton Council meeting and this story here. Woohoo! I gave you one. And some of these dates are bold and not, and that's to represent, weekends when we don't have coverage as well. But this basic idea of these are heading levels, so I can jump back and forth. This is a great planning tool to keep tabs on stories. You're not, going to act on every story idea you get, but it's nice to get into the habit of tracking ideas, especially as we move towards the summer term, the summer newsroom, which is going to have a focus both on covering the election and daily news coming up. But an important part of doing that is keeping tabs on stories that are coming to meetings and pitch meetings with ideas. And this is a tool I've been using in Advanced Online to assist our students, or when they don't come in with ideas, helping us keep track of what to cover. Remember in Emerging Tech, I shared that one slide, a study about where one particular U.S. newsroom got their news. Some of it was breaking, some of it was enterprise, but a lot of it was expectations. This kind of document or this kind of filing system, and it doesn't have to be something like this, is how you keep track of things are coming along. I might have had a note, hey, keep an eye on Blue Jays Twitter to see if there's any major signings today. Hint for baseball fans. Keep on stories like this. You can look ahead, and with a sort of system you have to keep tabs of stories that are coming up, it helps you. You can pitch in advance. Hey, next week something is happening. Could I do a story on that? Or getting in the regular habit. The key to helping come up with ideas for yourself is to get into regular routines of checking Twitter sources, regular websites, newsletters, newspapers, and keeping some sort of system to recall that. So that's something I wanted to share. Is that clear? An idea, something you could use if you're doing your own service next week, or to keep in mind for April or even the rest of multi-platform production and audio and video if things are back to normal. So we have seen the regular schedule for what's to happen. We've got a couple weeks of freelancers coming up. Or not freelancers, guest speakers coming up, and some flexibility if we have to shave a couple weeks out of this course. I will talk, we've already talked about website revamp last week. What's happening there? Pitching letters is something we will talk about today, and getting some more details about Humbert Currents, but I'll have that out. So any other questions about the labor situation, the strike deadline, or we'll move on at this point? Okay. Wanted to give you some feedback on the discussion board. Some great discussions in some groups, some great examples of professional websites that are out there, and showcasing a lot of them. A lot of them had that very similar minimalist look. Many people, I think it was Sydney, wrote, is it minimal for stylistic, or just minimal when you don't have anything to say? I thought of it, the white page, and I was thinking of books like anything by Malcolm Gladwell, The Tipping Point. This is a whole trend in publishing in the aughts, with a very simple white page. If your parents or you've read any of these on the bookshelf, even the Google homepage, and we've seen that design, that stark emptiness. I'm glad many of you found some WordPress sites. And the neat thing about, you can tell it's a WordPress site if you're signed into your own WordPress account. It tells you on the top that you're in another person's WordPress site. So it was good to see how some professional journalists took a WordPress design and that you're familiar with, and were able to make that as well. One service I do want to point out, I think Naima, I noticed it in one example she came up with, and there was another person in another group that had a website based on this service, journalportfolio.com. And if you check this out, this is, well, here, let me click on the link and we'll check it out together. Let me just share my screen. This, it looks like it's a website hosting service that is tailored towards showcasing portfolios. And there's a couple websites. You can either keep it like WordPress, so it'd be, mikewise.wordpress.com. In this case, mikewise.journalportfolio.com. Or you can get a pro version and just have this be your website. But there's templates, and it's very good at showcasing what you've actually published. And it looks like it kind of automates that. Like if you set up an RSS feed or something, you don't have to, every time you get something published, go back and update the blog and put it in there. It's showing your latest work, which can be good or bad, or things. So that's another option I wanted to bring out. Because a lot of the discussions in these discussion groups were limited, and there were so many neat designs people brought up, I created an entry on Blackboard where I just put a list of everything in no particular order that people had come up with. So, one group was talking about Jennifer Valentine's site, and if you didn't not in the group, you wouldn't have known that. And there's design things to pick up from that. So I've got a list of every website that people had talked to that you can feel free to peruse and take a look at. But really happy with some of those things. Are any questions about that discussion group or how this then leads into your assignment? Yeah.
Is it free to use the journal portfolio thing?
Let's find that out. Yes, there's a free plan. Your name at journalportfolio.com, just 10 articles. Looks like, I know, Naima, which one did you find? I could look it up, but...
I found, hold on. I could put the link in the
Yeah, because yours followed, like I discovered it because I wasn't familiar with this. It was like the journalist you found.journalportfolio.com. Yet there was another person who found another one. I can look it up. Hey, if I only had my notes. There was an example of a person who had something at the pro level. So it was Gary Phillips, journalportfolio.com. Here's some of these, and this is what Naima had come up with. And this Harsh found Kevin Tritter. That's an example of the same thing. And you can see some of the same design elements in that second one, but I believe that was a pro account because it used custom domain name in there. So, that was an option. Not sure at this early point, unless you've got a lot of stuff that's already out there, but that was not something I was familiar with. Okay, and let me get back to my notes. Okay. Well, buckle up because we got a lot to talk about with today's lesson. We are talking about freelancing and lessons to learn from that. So we're going to be talking about the pros and cons of freelancing, going into business for yourself and some things to keep in mind with that. Setting a budget, a very key part of going into freelancing and thinking about through a budget. The all-important question, setting rates and dealing with contracts, things you might not have thought about. Hopefully giving many resources for this. I just had a reminder to myself. Came out of nowhere, but there's a freelance union I should look up for that. We'll come back and talk about that. And of course, taxes. I am not a tax expert. I can give you an overview of freelancing and taxing and to keep in mind, but please consult a bookkeeper or a tax expert before you act on anything I'm talking about. And then, of course, drumming up business. I want to hear from you. What is your experience with freelancing? Who has done some? I have minimal experience with it. A couple projects, a couple one-offs, things like that. Some communication consulting work, a couple of speaking gigs. Actually did some communication consulting when I was locked out at CBC. So it was a side hustle during that. But long before the gig economy was a thing, there was freelance work, something that creative types, journalists have been involved with. Anyone have some experience with freelancing before coming?
I freelanced for 3 years in film production.
In film
that
production,
was all freelance. So from the first year and a half, it was in commercials. So jobs would be like 2 to 5 days long. So that was many, many different jobs that were very quick. And then I got into movies for about a year or so. And that was like 3 months long jobs. So they were a bit longer and more steady. Same paycheck from the same person consistently, as opposed to a whole bunch of tiny paychecks you keep track of and sort and figure out taxes on. But yeah,
when did the Tim has to hustle pay off with the Tim is a known person and might actually get occasional call coming back to you? When did that point happen?
It happened pretty quickly, but that's because there's a lot of jobs in film. Like if I wanted better jobs, that was the thing. So like very quickly, I was getting calls for a lot of work, and there was always days like I was turning down a lot of work, but like it was still pretty low level jobs. Getting the slightly better stuff definitely took, maybe 6 months to a year before I even started getting some of those, and then that built up.
Right. You demonstrated you could do the work and were dependable and come in, so they're going to call you. But if you want to advance, you're going to push yourself.
Yeah.
So anybody else?
Yeah, I freelance like as an editor, I would say, in video editing and stuff. So I would just randomly get calls and mails from a lot of YouTubers and all those film production companies that were like, "Oh, we need you here right now." So did that I think for a couple of years. Like when I started using the software for the first time, I wanted to get like hands-on experience. So I started doing freelancing. So for I think almost like a couple of months and years, I did that.
We'll come back to that point because it's like you were learning, and that's good. And I'm curious, starting out and learning it's great, but once you get really proficient, there's pros and cons to working as a freelancer when you're really efficient, but if you're stuck in a certain pay rate. So that is curious. Any other comments? There's a lot to explore in this, and I've read many articles aimed at journalism educators that say this is a big overlooked part of many journalism students' education. And it is such a reality that's out there that we really should be spending some more time. So this is one thing, I got a lot to talk about today because a lot to impart on this. Oh, cannot unmute. Is that AP? Is that Andrea? Andrea, yes. Okay, so she has done some freelancing there as well. So please drop your thoughts in chats there as well. I have got many additional resources for you on Blackboard. On the break, I'll make sure I've actually enabled them. I realized this morning that I had not enabled the recording of last week's class until this morning, so I apologize for that. And I will have a recording for this available to you as well. Put on YouTube, not Panopto. For union related issues, but you will have a recording. You're going to have access to that recording to cover these things again. Numerous links. As I was pulling some things together, putting a lot of links on here you can explore to go this. Voiceover freelancer through a platform called Fiverr. Okay. We will look through that and offer that. As you said, many journalism students wish they'd heard this when I was preparing to apply for this job, and I checked in with other graduates, many of them, and said, I wish we'd learned more about freelancing and basic tax things. If you got questions, if you're familiar with Kelly Roche, she has done a lot on Heather. He's also might have some more things. We're going to be talking about taxes. Again, I'm not a tax expert. I can give you broad things, but clearly you want to get professional advice for that. That said, we shall move on. How do we define a freelancer? Help me quit my job. Very helpful for anyone. Fiverr. I will look through that as well. Okay. How do you define what a freelancer is?
One who is not being permanently employed by any company, like they work in different companies in different times depending on their availability or choices, probably. I mean, they're not permanently employed per se. So.
They can be very flexible part-timers that get shifted around a lot, temp jobs here, there as well. So they're not employees with this. They can also be set up so that they are in control, running their own business and selling that service to someone else on an ad hoc basis. Tim, how did it work with you?
There was sort of a line people needed to hit in order for it to make sense for them to incorporate. So I forget exactly.
We'll talk about that. Yeah.
So I forget, if you were making under I forget exactly what the number was, but people would just pay taxes as individuals or above it incorporate, because then they're able to save a whole bunch of money through taxes that way. But yeah, mainly as an individual, you just get your cash, keep track of it, and at the end, have an accountant put it together, and you pay taxes.
Pretty much how that works, and we will cover a lot of that. Things that's scary, but we can hopefully get an understanding of where things work with this. So, freelancing. Let's talk pros and cons. Let's start with the Hulk. So, pros. Why would you want to go into freelancing? Flexibility, Sydney says. Yeah, absolutely. The number one thing that comes in, flexibility.
We can work at our will and we are not bound by any sort of contracts.
Mm-hmm. Pays better after a while. Yeah, certainly can. The harder you work, the harder you can get a benefit from it.
Yeah.
As well.
You can also like jump around, I would say, like faster potentially. Like if you are proving yourself, if you're not working within a company trying to move up, you're just getting people to pay you for what you're able to do.
I love this. The only terrible manager is yourself. If that were only true, great point. You know, a lot of it is on you. You'll still encounter terrible managers, but or at least terrible employers or things like that. Yeah, as we'll talk today, a lot of this is on you with this. So yeah, you can make a living too. We'll get to explore different places. Yeah, Malav as well. Many people approach travel and look for things here. You get to sample different employers, exposure, all very good. If you don't like a topic, you don't have to write about it. You pitch what you want to write about. I don't want to write any crap about, restaurant openings, or maybe you do want to write restaurant openings. You're not at the mercy of your boss. Direct ability to build your brand as you're talking. Yeah, exposure on that.
You can also just choose to take a month off because you don't want to work for a while and go on vacation.
You could do that, yeah. And if you write an article while you're on vacation, it becomes a deductible expense. So we'll come back to that. Can prioritize yourselves, wants and needs. Yeah, exactly. Okay, let's do the other side. Does that be Red Hulk? I don't know my the downsides here as well. What are the cons?
No benefits.
No benefits. Lack of many benefits. Lack of security initially. Yeah. It can be scary, yeah. Thank
even
gosh
throughout
for
lack of
OHIP.
security. Yeah, because like even throughout lack of security, because even if when I was freelance, if it was a 2-week job, at the end of it, you're effectively unemployed and you're just hoping for the next thing to come in again.
Yeah, there's a lot of hustling that you need to do, and you need to factor in that there's a hustle. And if you got a great 2-week job, you're right. You're working flat out, making good money in those 2 weeks, but you don't have time in those 2 weeks to look for what's going to put money on the table for Monday. So there's an aspect of that. Taking care of finances, budget, lack of stability, lack of many benefits. We do have OHIP, that's good, but not pharmacare, dental, all the other things we look for.
You have to be really good at holding yourself accountable too. Looking for those jobs yourself because no one's handing them to you.
Exactly. You need to network, find clients, pitch clients, bill clients, figuring out how to make sure, what happens if they don't pay that invoice in time and all that. And there's software packages and things you can go on with that as well. No sick pay, vacation pay. You can go on vacation, but the bank, there's nothing that shows up in the bank when you're away.
There's a lack of protection in general. Like a lot of them don't have, certain number of hours a day or like anything like that. You could be working 24 hours a day on a job. Yeah,
like accordion hours. It gives you some flexibility, but when it rains, it pours, and then you might have nothing. And coming up, you don't work 9 to 5. You can work more. All that's so pros and cons, and that's good. I had a great discussion. I like that as well. Of course, it doesn't have to be full time either. Some people start out just trying it, doing a little bit, flexing a little bit of the freelance things. It can be an option to help you develop some journalistic skills if your life circumstances change, or you have a partner who takes a job somewhere else and you're trying to establish yourself there. We see a lot of that. Don't find that first entry-level job you wanted. You can freelance on the side as a way to develop new opportunities. Maybe if you do have an entry-level job or just a job that you need to like pay the rent, you can still find some freelance opportunities on a part-time basis on the side to build that portfolio, build those connections, and hopefully build towards a point where it leads to full-time work, or with the hustle, you maybe you can quit the Starbucks and just devote yourself full-time into this. So this isn't something you want to jump into right away, though. Becoming a freelance journalist is like setting up your own business. That's important to think about. And that business is you. So let's just talk about the business of you. And let's talk about the first half of this course when we talked about setting up businesses. Think back to the Google Startup Playbook, like a couple weeks ago. What are some things we can focus on? Here's another
Selling
way.
our qualities.
Yeah. What is your job to be done? What are the skills you can do? It doesn't mean you can, yes, you can freelance as a full-fledged journalist, but there's other skills you got. What can you do? Andrea put up the example of independent, voiceover work. That's an aspect of something on a freelance basis. That's great. What will you focus on? What are your areas of expertise? This is connecting a lot to what we were talking about last week in terms of personal branding. What is it you want to be known about? What are you? And, what are you good at? What do you want to focus on? And how can you put those skills forward as a freelancer? What will you stay on? How will you stay on top of your game is an important thing. Well, I want to be a freelance video game reporter. I'm never going to subscribe to any video game. What are you going to do to stay on top of that niche and show that the job to be done that you can demonstrate is you? What skills do you have to do that? What's on the chat here? Audio, video editing, things like that. But, you're an audio, video editor. What can you do if you're very fluent on Final Cut Pro? What do you do when the latest Premiere comes out? Do you have means to be trained on that? Are you prepared to look into that? What sort of development plan do you have for yourself? And this gets into things we were talking about last week. Career planning. What can you do to stay on top of your game? How can you demonstrate that you can do the work?
We can write reviews or make videos, YouTube videos.
Other things like that, yeah. So, with Fiverr, you can offer any services you want, per your own prices and deadlines, charges. Oh, still very good. Okay, I think we'll all look that up over the break and take a look at that. The break, I mean the lunch break, the stand up and stretch break, not anything else. So if you have an interest in covering science things, what kind of science or environmental writing can you do? Where will stories come from? What are you going to do to stay on top of your game there? If you're into freelance travel writing, entertainment writing, how do you build upon that sense of knowledge so that these are some things you want to look into? How can you demonstrate that work? Well, we've talked about that in terms of personal websites, and many of the websites you came up with as examples had portfolios, and even the one we were looking at earlier is all about showcasing a portfolio. You need to demonstrate that you can do the work. Showcase something that showcases what you can do. You can refer clients to that. Employers can look at it. Writing samples, blog posts, photography, social media skills. Make sure the pieces are relevant, show some depth, a variety of your skills depending on what you want to showcase. Many of you notice that in many of the professional websites. They would break down entrepreneurial examples. Here's some consulting I've done here. Here's my social media skills. Here's the branding skills we've done. Making it quite clear, showcasing, hey, this is the job I can do. Now, one thing I think Andrea noticed in one of the sites she went out, it was looking at testimonials. And one piece of advice I've heard many times is you should write your own personal brag list. This can be a document in in Google Docs or in your notes or something like that. And it's just an ongoing list when you think you've done something really good or have had praise for or something like that, or had a good collaboration, write it down in the moment to reference later, because it'll become in the future like, oh my God, have I ever done any work on social media marketing? I can't think of anything. job interview or something like that. But if you get in the habit of writing down your brag list, oh, have I done anything on social media? Yeah, actually, there was a project I was involved with once, and here's what we did, blah, 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 blah. You'll more readily recall these, or you'll be able to prepare for a pitch meeting, an interview, a chance elevator happening, any sort of networking opportunity. Oh, hey there, Mr. Sportsnet. If you're looking for something, I'm very interested. Oh, what have I done in sports? Well, actually, I was a sideline commentator for the basketball championships at Humber College, or did some other stuff. You've got a brag list that you can go to. Related to that is the idea of collecting testimonials. And Andrea noted that in this website here, Nature Traveler. I mentioned this come up. So this is Lavanya Sankara, and this is a WordPress site as well. But let's look what she's got here. Testimonial section. I know Andrea talked about this here. She pulled a lot from LinkedIn, and LinkedIn is very good at this. But in addition to putting up stories she's done, this can be an effective, look at all these lovely things these people are saying about it. You do want to get, I hope to gosh, she's got Lisa's permission to put her quote up on there, or Wendy's, thing up there, because where do you get testimonials? You can ask someone, oh, I'm glad you really were happy with my work. Could you perhaps give me a testimonial or something I could put on LinkedIn or my website? You could do that if you're comfortable with someone with something in there, or if you get preferably it'd be nice if someone says, oh, really like that article. It was a pleasure working with you. I might ask them back, hey, thanks. Would you mind if I quote this on a testimonial page? Performance reviews, obviously, if you're working in an agency, like a job where there's a regular performance review section, you can pull from things there. Thank you cards, LinkedIn recommendations. I think that's fair game. If someone is going to use the LinkedIn, I don't know if you see this on LinkedIn as much, the testimonial function there, where LinkedIn, I've been prompted a couple times, hey, this person, would you ever want to endorse them for skills or write a recommendation or ask for recommendations? It's part of the social currency that you see when you get involved with LinkedIn. That is something you might want to, work on. Hey, create a network of people. You don't want to brag or do anything like that. But the key part with any time you seek out a recommendation or anything like that is, of course, getting permission before you make them public. I saw a journalism prof a couple weeks ago who, how every course we ask you to please fill out that anonymous feedback for how you think the instructor is doing. The contract between us and them is you give us anonymous feedback, and we use that to improve the course, or double down on any strengths we have, maybe address some weaknesses we have. I don't tweet the results, and that's what this new person was doing. I'm like, that's not kosher. That's not cool. It was anonymous. I still think it was cool. So obviously, make sure it's appropriate and making some things public. Any questions about that? Okay.
Can we add reference letters in the testimonials?
Yeah. If someone gives you a reference letter, yeah, I think you could pull a quote from that, because the expectation of giving you that reference letter is they've given some. Again, I would always, you never want to burn anyone's bridges, and if you give you something like that and say, hey, could I pull a quote or something of that and put it on my website? Because they might just think the reference letter is for a specific. If it's written for a specific job, I'd want to check. If someone gives you a general reference letter, hey, you're a great person, I think anyone could hire you. Yeah, I think you might be in better position to put that on a website or something like that. But
I guess it's better to pull out quotes from the reference letter.
yeah, if you have those are good then. Okay. Well, many people were talking in the pros and cons here. We've got to talk about self-management and some of those other aspects of running a business. Where are you going to work from? Are you going to run your freelance work out of a coffee shop? Some space you're doing your coursework, or WeWork, your parents' basement, the library? These are some things in mind. Time management, quite important. How are you going to manage your time? Freelancing is great. It allows you to set your own hours, but you need to get a good grip on those hours and stay focused on those hours. If you have a full-time or a part-time job, that adds structure to your life, especially as the pandemic ends and we get used to, okay, I got to get out the door by 7:30 to hop on the streetcar to get to work and all of that. With freelance, you need some systems to help regulate and balance and track your time. Anyone familiar with the idea of time tracking or time blocking? Way to think about time blocking is sort of an aggressive way of using your calendar. We use calendars to organize our day. I've got class here, this point here. Um, Time blocking is not just saying, hey, I have a meeting Tuesday at 2 o'clock, but it's a way of using your calendar to say, hey, Tuesday morning from 9 until 11, I am blocking off that time and I'm going to work on this ahead of time. A very scheduled thing. If you looked at my schedule, it's looking like that. As I'm planning into the summer, I'm blocking off chunk. I've got like different accounts in my calendar. So I've got, I can stack. I've got a Humber meeting. I've got personal stuff. I've got time blocking chunks that I can use to help me plan and organize some things. It can help you set aside time. Hey, Monday morning, I'm going to devote 2 hours to contacting potential editors and drumming up some business for that. That's my business development time. Tuesday, I know I've got that project. I'm going to block out everything. Wednesday, I can't. I've got a doctor's appointment. It's also maybe a good day to go connect with that friend I haven't seen for a while. So time blocking is a strategy where you're planning well in ahead your hours for the week so you get a sense and stick to that schedule. Lets you also get some balance in your life. So you block off time to go to the gym. You block off time to socialize. You block off time to meditate or whatever you need to do to help with that. If you are charging by the hour, you should also want to take care of your hours. I want to show you a program I have been using called Toggle. Anyone ever heard of this? This is a time tracking program. There's many that do this. And actually, as we've been speaking in the background, let me just share a screen here. I've been tracking my time here. Where is it? So here I am teaching our class. I've been at it for 52 minutes, 51 seconds at this point. And it just gives me a nice, like, this morning, how did I spend my morning? Well, I was marking, reviewing emails, marking, election planning meeting, marking. It was an early start to the day, and I've been doing this. Initially, it became a question from, here's yesterday's work. And this is just tracking so I can get a sense of where my time has been going. It was initially something the union suggested just so that we have a good sense of what our work, how many hours you're spending on, and it's been eye-opening to do that. But I have found just that sense of, what's the word I'm looking for? Setting an intent. What's the being mindful, mindfulness, mindful use of my. If I click that timer and say, this time is the time I'm going to be spending working on that freelance lesson or working on the slides, I'm less likely to go, have I played Wordle yet? Okay, let me do that. Or, it's been a useful thing. We'll see how with anything. And no, I haven't played Wordle today. I got to, no one drop a hint. It's been useful, but certainly if you are expecting to be paid for your time, a tool like that is also useful. I'm using a free one there as well, but you can see this is useful for tracking. Okay, I have spent this time. Also, if you need to demonstrate to a client, how much time did you actually work on this? Well, according to my schedule, I was working on this time, and therefore I'm going to bill you for these particular times. So it can work both ways. How many of you are familiar with the Pomodoro technique? This is a time management method developed by a man named Francesco Cirillo in the late 1980s, and it suggests that to be productive, you need to break your work down into 25-minute intervals separated by short breaks. That allows you to focus, and then you walk away from the computer. You get some, walk on grass, as they say. You get away for 5 minutes, maybe go to the washroom, get some water, and then come back and do some work again. It's the idea of thinking is that it's harder for us to concentrate on long stretches. I find I'm able to motor through with that other timer I have. But I've used this as well. The Pomodoro technique is named after a tomato-shaped kitchen timer that he bought as a university student. Tried this method once, gave it up after a while. I think it says, yeah. Yeah, oh, Andrea likes these here. This is my piggy timer. I couldn't actually find a Pomodoro, so I have this little pink pig that's a simple timer. I've also tried numerous apps that are running in the background that time there. I've got some that aren't there, but between Toggle, Calendar, and this thing, it helps me. Pomodoro. Pomodoro? Can you please spell that out? Okay, Pomodoro. Where I got the piggy timer? I got the piggy timer, just any old kitchen supply store. Back in the days when we left our houses to buy things, yeah, it was just at a kitchen supply store around. I was looking, maybe you'll actually find a proper tomato in there as well. So I will leave this on, and in 20 minutes you'll hear it go. Well, here, I'll put it 12 minutes, and it'll go off, and it'll remind me, I'll forget about it. But it's ticking away in the background there as well. There are, of course, other things you need to track. Besides your notes, do you have a good note tracking system? As a student, as a journalist, I was a big fan of Google Docs. Evernote I've used in the past. Word, Google Docs, things like that. These are important things to keep in mind. But there's also lessons we can take from sales. And Tim's got his camera up, and I know he's done sales work as well. What's a CRM, Tim? Do you know? Okay.
I'm drawing a complete blank right now.
I think it's customer resource management, something like that.
Something like that. Yeah, customer relationship management system. Salesforce, maybe you've heard of that.
Yeah, I worked on Salesforce.
Like out in industry, it's a big thing. What is it?
Salesforce, it's like a software that you have on your computer that, I mean, it's, I'm sure, built for different companies slightly differently, but the one I worked on was just a whole funnel system to track all of my sales, have a whole account system so I knew all of my customers and had all their information, contact details, and then potential clients and all that. So it was just a full range of organizing everything.
Yeah. It's like your own personal Google. It's tracking everything, whereas Google's tracking everything you do for its benefit. A customer relationship management system lets you personalize and track things. So it might interface with your email. So every time you talk to people, oh, the last time you talked to this person is here. So it's great if you're in sales. Like, oh, I need to follow up. Did I close that deal? I better do that. And oh, hey, and let me, hey, I hear you got a new nephew. How's that going? Track all these sort of things. If you've ever been in any sort of sales, I was blown away one time. I was one place and like, oh, so tell me, how is your wife? I'm like, oh, how do the people know all this? And like, they don't have a super memory. They've got a customer relationship management system, and they spent 5 minutes reviewing my file beforehand. I'm like, oh, this person knows me. No, no. But that said, there are personal systems that are developing. I've tried a couple of these out, to varying successes, but just as you can use it in sales to market yourself, there's services like one is called Up Habit or Dex. I think that's Dex I just showed. Up Habit is actually a Toronto-based company that's working on this. And let me just drop a link, an Atlantic magazine that talks about this as a burgeoning software area. These are considered personal CRMs that let you keep track of contacts and set reminders, let you know how to follow up on them, track the number of times you've reached them. If you don't have, you can track editors you're pitching. You can track people that are as I mentioned, a lot of work as a journalist is getting into routines to check for story ideas, keep in touch with people. Hey, it's been a while since I called you up. What? Tell me what's happening in the industry. What's happening? It's a sort of a professional layer to add on top of your contacts. Especially if you're in a particular, you're covering business and you've got a bunch of people you talk to. A good reporter, you want to get into routine of reminding to follow up on things. a personal CRM can help you with that. Hey, Jim, it's been a while talking. What's happening at the finance guy? How's the wife? How's the kid? You know, those sort of touch frame things, and adding a little bit more information to that, reminding people's birthdays. Don't just rely on your social media thing to remind you that, oh, it's my friend's birthday. You know, I've got that in my to-do list. I, wished my buddy a birthday this morning and took it off of that. So CRMs are useful. The other really good thing, I know you millennials and Zeds, buy a printer. If you don't have a printer already, a printer and a scanner and a filing cabinet to file things away. Time to grow up and start killing some trees. Why? You need to track your records. You need to track your expenses. You need to track your contracts. Send them around. Maybe a scanner that lets you. There's fax services. No one actually needs a fax machine anymore. But thoughts?
I kind of want to push back on you on this. I don't know if you need a printer and scanner at all, because you can store everything digitally on hard drives. You can get, I know there's on your phones, Adobe Fill and Sign, which lets you fill out any contract or PDF sent to you and sign it as well. So I don't know if printers are necessary.
At the very least, an external hard drive and backup system. The computer I'm talking to you right now is being backed up 3 ways. And my computer is still beside my printer, which is beside there as well. I've got an external hard drive outside. I've got a cloud-based backup system, and then I've got 5. No, I've got iCloud, and I pay for the full iCloud, so all my documents are up on that. And I've also got a Google Drive and Office 365. So I've got, multiple backups for a number of things, because that is great. Don't keep it all on the laptop that can get stolen in the coffee shop. Don't keep it all on the phone that can fall in the toilet and ruin. You want to at least make sure there's something. But occasionally there will be paper. Maybe there's paper you need to scan to get around, and it's more professional than taking a picture. So, okay, we can, push back taken there as well. Another thing you might need to know, though, is the contract, especially if you're dealing with someone. So let's talk contracts. If you're dealing with a new client, you might want to present them with the contract. Well, you should be presenting them with the contract. You should control the terms of how you are wanting to work and what's in there as well. Who's ever had to figure out their own contract presented to someone? Usually, you might be presented with one. Hey, do you agree with these terms? But has anyone ever had to figure out their own contract and what to do? Okay. Talk about what kind of things. Oh, sorry. I think. Nope. Okay. There are resources that you can look for, and I think I've got some of the links on there as well. But when we talk about like a freelancer contract, okay, you want to buy my services, and I'm going to write this article for you. What are some things you might want to have some control on and spell out in terms of a contract with someone you're doing work with? Any ideas?
I don't know if
How
that
much you're
counts,
getting
but when I started off as like a freelancer in video editing, I had to make sure to tell them that these are the softwares that I'm going to work with, and when I'm working, I need the script as well and stuff. Like I need certain information and certain things on me so that I can work things out and I can edit the video with it. So, and also the payment and stuff. So what I'm expecting and stuff. So I made those certain no thing, told them what they have to do, and they're like, okay, this is what I do.
Absolutely. So both Tim and you mentioned the 2 number 1. Obviously, contract is going to set your rate. What am I going to be paid, and how are you going to pay it? But then, very important, defining the scope of the work to be done. Okay, you need to get me a script by this point in order for me to finish something by this point. And if you're going to delay on that, that's, I got to get food on the table. If you don't have that script to me by Wednesday, and I have to wait till Thursday. Well, I got a job Thursday. There's a penalty. You want to even think through that, because we can also talk about timelines, deliverables, revisions to edits, dates and deadlines, and penalties for them not meeting the deadline, penalties for you maybe meeting the deadline as well. Setting your rate, defining the scope of the work, that was great. Talk about, okay, I'm going to edit this just so that at the end you are going to get an MP4 video file, this format from me, and I'm going to use this to edit it. So don't expect, oh, I thought you were using Adobe Premiere. No, it said I was using Final Cut Pro, and if there's a compatibility issue on your side, that's you, because you know what I was doing. If anyone, I wished I learned all this before I had my bathroom renovated, because I didn't set out the scope of the deal. Like, oh, you mean I got to do that? And the contractors are like, yeah, no, you didn't ask for that, so that's an extra $1,000, Mike.
Oh, you wanted floors? No.
Oh, you wanted actual floor? Oh, you wanted them straight. The contract didn't say that the tiles were supposed to be flat. So, yeah, you also want to set up reasonable changes and revisions. So, obviously, setting up the rate, and we will talk about rate. It's a very complicated thing to talk about, but rate is something we'll talk about. Define the scope of the work you're doing, reasonable changes and revisions. And there's something called scope creep to be careful of. Hey, can you do one more thing for me? Yeah, it won't take more than 5 minutes. Yeah, no. How do you deal with that? I'm going to do this for you. I will let you take a look at my work as a rough edit. You can suggest changes, and then I will finalize the final edit for you. That's anything beyond that. If I deliver you the final project and you ask for a few more tweaks, and it's not correcting a mistake I made, it's an additional thing, well, we need to negotiate additional things after that. This is about protecting you and your time. It can be hard to be thinking this aggressive when you're just starting off and your calendar is empty. Well, I'll just work until I need to. But if you're juggling multiple jobs and they start bleeding into each other, it's important to get these things out in writing. So dates, deadlines. I'll get this done by you, but more importantly, I need this material from you by this time. I can't put my life on hold. Agreements on deliverables and formats, as we were talking about. This is why, with assignments, I'm like, I need it in PDF or doc file. If you sent to Pages, it meant I had to convert it back and forth. In a freelance world, they ask for a doc, don't send a page. Pages is great software, but that's payment terms. Okay, I'm going to need some upfront here to work on this, a deposit on this, and then you can pay it after this. At a certain point, maybe I will charge interest if I don't get paid after that. You also need to talk about termination. Much as Gabriel thinks he's never going to encounter an asshole or a bad boss, there might be someone you just can't get along with, and they are driving you crazy. And how do you get out of the project? It's just not going to work for me. I knew a friend who knew a colleague that left the job after a week. They just weren't working out with that as well. And also, if you get terminated, how do you protect? How do you agree on that? It's not you, it's me clause. That's just not working out. Can think about intellectual property rights. Who owns your work? And it's not as simple as, oh, of course you do. You paid me for it as well. What do they work on? Can you republish your own work on your website? If you happen to have one of those great journo portfolio pages and it automatically puts, you can do that, right? You're taking their link and oh, there's Piggy going off. Can they just publish it online? Can they republish it? We don't know. In their future metaverse site 10 years from now, can they take all your intellectual property and put it in a brand new format that hasn't been figured out? This was some issues that came up into the 90s, and oh, I just wrote for the newspaper. I didn't give you online rights. They consult with an expert about the latest thinking about this. I bring this up as something you should look into as well. But can you showcase your own work on your own website? Can they repackage this in the future for some not yet developed service in the metaverse? Can they syndicate your work? Is it just going to be seen in the country where the publisher is based? Can you retain the rights to sell this elsewhere? Certainly in TV programs, that's how rights are. Unless you're dealing with a Netflix, which buys worldwide rights until it doesn't. But for broad, that can be something to keep in mind as well. Again, can't go into the details. You can find sample contracts online and books related to freelancing, getting advice from lawyers and setting these up, other freelancers, freelancer unions. There's plenty of advice to get in there. I just want to raise this around. Yeah, and you can mess around with digital signatures. I still say, print these things out and have them. And Tim won't fight me on that, but that is okay. Also need to consider, invoicing. You get a contract, you want to get paid, you need to send a system, send out an invoice, remind them to follow up if they still haven't been paid yet. Can anyone think of some freelance software that's out there that people can use to help with doing their books rather quickly?
FreshBooks.
FreshBooks, QuickBooks, there's programs and things like that, yeah. Others like to be more hands-on, use a spreadsheet or some other tool, email it, FreshBooks, You also need to track expenses, particularly when it comes to tax time. We'll talk about that after the break. Plenty of apps and services to help you out with that. So just like starting in business, there are startup costs to consider to starting up your career as a freelancer. I'm glad Sydney said, what was her comment early on? I'm just going through there. The idea with freelance, it'll take a while to get established, but it could pay off with time. There's a startup with that, and there are startup costs to come here. So that brings us to the big question. What should you charge?
As much as you possibly can.
As much as you possibly can. And it's complicated. You know me by now. $1,000 an hour, sure, why not? It's a complicated thing. But one of the big challenges in thinking about freelancing is figuring out what you should charge. How do you want to make a living? So I want to give you a thought experiment, and we'll just walk through this a little bit. Say you're offered a gig for a local website. It says it'll pay you $300 an article you write for them. Is this a good deal?
Yes.
Not bad. Well, maybe, yeah. There's no wrong answers here. This is a thought experiment.
They haven't specified the length. You could just pump out a whole bunch of 200-word articles. You're making bank.
Yeah. So it could be great. So let's say it takes you 5 hours to do the research, conduct the interviews, write up a story, go through the vetting process. Works out to $60 an hour. $60 an hour, not a bad freelance rate, right? Yeah, especially, that's 4 times the minimum wage. If you could get this consistently, it's $2,400 a week. What does that work out to a yearly? $124,000, which is more than I make. That's not so $300 an hour. Not bad. However, is this good or bad? Is this a faulty way of thinking about it, or poke some holes into this? Critical thinking skills. Is it realistic?
Is it guaranteed that you will be paid that much for every article? There can be difference out there. And budgeting matters. We don't know our cost of living and standard of living, and that matters. Taxes, rents, and every other cost that we have to do. So we have to take into account all those things before thinking is this a good job or not.
Yeah, if you can bang out 10 stories a day at 300 an article, hey, you're great. But are they going to be shitty and that's the last day you ever work for that person? Or they might not pay you for that. And what if it takes longer than 5 hours to work on one of those and it messes up your day? Depends on how good the article is, of course. Yeah. If it takes longer than that, that messes up your time, your ability to do some things. Plus, there's always taxes, death and taxes you got to consider. There's also support work. You need to send out invoices, handle your banking, take care of that. So the idea that you could do a 40-hour work week at $60 an hour, as Tim was saying, some days he was working freelance gigs, but you probably didn't have time to do your laundry, let alone do, any of his other support stuff. Because you need to find not only the next story you need to write, you need to find the next job with that as well. And part of the advice they give freelancers is you might spend 25 to 50% of your week hustling to find your next gig. There are plenty of unpaid hours that go into freelancing. So that 40-hour work week could cut down to just maybe 20 hours, even if you kept this up. So that's, you could be working longer, down to the equivalent of 30 hours, still no stability. Maybe you can only squeeze in 2 stories. So if you're down to making, 2 stories, $600 in the week, that's 15 an hour. You're making more at Starbucks. Considering that route. If in the course of a week, all you can squeeze out is two $300 articles. So that's not necessarily an effective way of thinking about whether freelancing makes sense for you. And a better way to think about it is to take your inspiration from a supermodel. Why not, right? Anyone recognize this woman? Oh, darn, I left the thing. You can read the screen. Duh. Okay. Linda Evangelista. Does anyone remember her? She did make the cover of People recently for a botched thing. She is from Niagara. That is right. Supermodel, like rose to fame 88, 89. I think she was in a George Michael video at some point. Very famous Canadian face. Known for a quote, which she's since come to regret. I don't get out of bed for less than $10,000 a day. At the height of her supermodel thing, in fairness, she said she was joking. This is based on a line in a Brad Pitt movie in the late 80s. The lesson we take from that is she knew her worth as a supermodel. And that can be used as a lesson to value your own worth. What is your Linda Evangelista number? I won't get out of bed for $300 an article. It's just not worth. I'm not going to get, it's complicated to get at that. Now, we're going to give you an exercise we'll do with a break to get that as well. But it comes down to doing, as Natika was mentioned, some personal budgeting. What do you need to work on? You figure out your Linda Evangelista number by figuring out what's it take to keep the lights on and a roof over your head and the Presto card being paid and the food going in the tummy and all those sort of things. And that can help you not only set your rate, but also evaluate the kind of work you're doing and give you a sense of just how much hustle you need to do to make a go of this and when you need to supplement it with other things and going around. So I'll give you a spreadsheet where you can start figuring out some of these expenses, like, groceries, rent, mortgage, household expenses, restaurants, drinks, because we want a life at some point, want to go out. And like with any budget, these figures squeeze and contract based on what you have. Netflix, streaming services, music streaming, I'm trying to think realistically, what are we, doing? Other subscriptions, gym memberships, entertainment, car, public transportation, insurance, cell phone, internet, gifts, retirement savings, always good to save for the future. Maybe that's not something you can do if you're on a very thin budget. Maybe this is all aspirational at this point. Professional associations. You are a freelance. You'll want to join some associations to help develop contacts and things. Equipment, clothing, hair. There may be many things else for you to consider. I do have a spreadsheet I'm going to give you that'll help you work this through. So I went through. I couldn't find my work to go through here. I used some numbers that I was playing around with, and I sort of estimated that this could come up to, about $4,000 a month expenses. Rent in Toronto, all these sort of things there, and you can play around with that to get to that. So, $4,000 a month, $48,000 a year of expenses. Does that mean you'll need to clear $1,000 a week, at least 3 of those articles, in order to pay everything you do? So $4,000 a month is $1,000 a week. Hey, you file 3 $300 articles. You're good, right? It's how we can start thinking about it. Are we there yet? Not yet. Because of course, taxes. You need to set aside 30% for taxes. So one way of thinking about that is to take 30% away from 4,000, or you can assume that in order to clear $4,000 a month to apply towards my living expenses, my budget I've set up for myself, I need to, set aside 30%. That's 12. So actually, I need to make $5,200 a month or $1,300 a week to make a living. Then it's suddenly like, ooh, I would need to write at least 5 of those $300 a week articles to make a living. And can I squeeze that in, and can I do all that there as well? That's just you scraping by, depending on how generous you were. Maybe you need less if you aren't worried yet about your savings yet. And if you're just starting out, come on, let's be realistic. Or, if you're still at home and you can count on your parents' Netflix, you can keep a lot of these expenses down, but we're all in different situations, things to keep in mind, or if there's a partner or a roommate you can depend upon, it can help with some things. But the advice many freelancers are given is if you are just covering your expenses and your taxes, you're not, you should aim for more. You should have a little bit more. And so they talk about adding in profit, 30% to cover the lean weeks when there are no jobs and you've got some additional padding and savings, but also enough to be able to, live life a little bit and have some comfort. We all don't just settle for the minimum we need to survive. We want to grow, invest, do some things, enjoy life. So that then, to add that 30% on top of that in taxes, we need to make $6,760 a month, $82,000 a year, or it's, almost $1,700 a week. So that becomes our Linda Evangelista number. With this budget to get to there, we need to clear that. And that can help you like, oh, geez, how much do I need to do to hustle to find jobs and get some sense of what to pay? So I'd like you to figure out your own Linda Evangelista number. And what I'm going to do, I am going to share this spreadsheet with you by dropping it. I thought I was going to do it. And this lets you play around with your own numbers. Rent. Read-only mode. Anyway, it allow you populate and automate these things. I've got some formulas behind the scenes that get you down to the blue, the weekly Linda Evangelista number. So let me just download that. I thought I had that downloaded. Any questions about this? We'll take a break because I've been talking for a bit. I'd like you to just play around with it. I am lost with my notes. And figure out your... There we are. And there as well. So there's an Excel spreadsheet you can play around with. I've got 1:53 right now. How about we come back at 10 after 2? All right. I will see you then. Thank you. We'll take a stretch break. Okay, welcome back. I just want to show you a resource Rob was telling me about. Unifor, which is one of the largest unions in the country, and it through a series of mergers and stuff, it took over NABET, which was a technical union, and also a union that I believe they represent CTV, perhaps Global as well. So Unifor, also Canadian Auto Workers, a number of unions, I believe, have come together. That said, what you see here is the Canadian Freelance Union, and it is if you are doing freelance work, writers, artists, photographers, videographers, web designers, anything else in media, it is a freelance union that you can join. Help out with contract mediation, comprehensive health insurance, other things that can come from here. So details of it, let me just drop this in the chat so you have this resource. I haven't added it to Blackboard, but I should. The Canadian Freelance Union. Becoming a member looks like dues of $125 annually. That's cheap for union dues. And it gets you some measure of protection, but number of resources that they mention here, what we offer. Insurance plans tailored for freelancers, press cards, grievance support, contract advice, even a template. And this is something useful. Service to help members interpret the contracts they face. Help you sense if you're getting a bad contract, what it means, and even a contract template. It just found this here. Okay, yes, I'm on the right account. How do I get rid of... There. Things we're talking about. A template you can use. Pick from what you're doing, name of the work to be performed, scope, detail, timelines, deadlines, revisions, and changes. What are you willing to do? In case of dispute, include cost of 20% of the entire value of the contract if the client terminates. Include recognition of CFU to mitigate conflict in case of contract dispute. Include termination clauses. You know how to get out of this. Kill fee clause, something we didn't talk about. What if they say, nice story, we'll pay you for it, but we're never going to publish it? What are the details? Refundable cancellation fees, confidentiality, non-disclosure clauses. So this is an incredible resource to go through. Intellectual property, handover rights declined entirely. Indemnity, liability. If you get sued, they're going to back you up. Failure to perform. What happens if you don't? File recognition of work. To name the contractor in the final work presentation. You know, quoted costs, laws, modification of agreement clause, signatures, etc. So some very useful resources to consider and look into. And in that budget thing I sort of mentioned, you know, you should look to build in professional associations with that. Freelancers Union, maybe joining up with Journalism Association or something like that to assist you with the all-important networking you're going to be doing as you're starting up. Any thoughts on that? Any thoughts, Samson? No? Okay. How did your Linda Evangelista numbers go? Am I living the lap of luxury with $4,000 a month, or? All right.
I need much more, but that's because I'm a diva. So
Okay, yeah. All the hair and makeup cost just for you, Tim. Yeah, I was trying to be realistic, trying to think back. My student, well, yeah, I don't want to tell you what I used to pay for rent as a student. Okay, boomer. I'm an Xer. Don't get angry with me. I'm a Gen X, not a boomer. We're ruining the planet in our own ways. We don't have to blame. Okay, let me just get back. We need to, again, talk about this question, which I'm skirting around there. How much should you charge? The big question we're asking. Or how do you charge for your services? And the answer is, of course, it depends. Good night. Thanks. See you next week. No. Some people like to get paid by the job. Some freelancers get paid by the word. And you don't want a very, 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 very poor job of padding out the words or anything like that. Some by the hour, some by the project. So it's flexible with this, and you need to look at the various ways that this happens. Setting a freelance rate is difficult because it's difficult to know how much you're worth. We've talked about that. We get a sense of that, having a sense of what it is. Yeah, Malav, yeah, money subscriptions and restaurants, yeah. Okay, good to know. Need to figure out what the market will bear or what the range the organization pays. I want to make sure your rates are competitive, but not too expensive. You know your own worth. That's great. You want to charge enough so you can make a living wage, but not so much that clients will think you're overpriced or they hire someone else. So it's a bit of a dance you need to do with this. Other things to keep in mind. Is there travel involved? Other specific expenses, mileage, equipment that you need to know. Freelance photographers need to cover their equipment costs as well, either renting it or taking the fact that you're bringing equipment with you. At CBC, we quite often hired freelance camera people, and their daily rate was more if they were using their own gear, because they were bringing their own gear. If they were coming in and using the CBC's gear, then they couldn't charge as much. But sometimes if you wanted a particular look or a particular photographer, you couldn't say to them, hey, well, can you cut, that $600 off your rate and use our gear? Like, no, it's my gear. It's, as Marshall McLuhan once said, it's an extension of the nervous system. They're familiar with this stuff. They know what their gear can do. They know how to use it versus spending time going, what the hell is this crap the CBC gave me? Plugging around. They'll know their stuff, and you're paying for that. So that can go into rates. If you are, expected to take photos for your own assignment, you can charge more to cover the cost of maintaining your own gear. We'll talk about taxes and implications for that as well. Another factor is what skill set you have. Do you have an in-demand skill? Then, well, your rates should reflect that. If you're a copywriter and the client needs someone who can write well and quickly or write speeches and you're good at that, then they'll pay more for your services than going after someone that doesn't have it. Oh, so you've never actually written a political speech before and you want to write for Doug Ford? Yeah, good luck asking for this guy. But if you're David Frum and they ask you to write a speech, you're going to be able to pay a premium because he's got experience with that. One of the most important considerations, of course, is how much time you need to spend on the project. And that's going to be hard as you start figuring out, like, what's it going to take for me to do this? If it takes you a lot of time, you should charge more on jobs than it takes if it requires less of your time. But there are different approaches for how you can charge for your time, and this will change based on the job, etc. So let's look at a wedding. Say you partner with a wedding photographer to build websites for happy couples showing off all those wedding photos that they just paid for. It's going to pay the rent. It's not bad. You've done some basic website design. So should you charge for the hour for this project? Pros and cons. It might take you, maybe 6 hours to build your first website. So, okay, charging for the hour. Okay, I made 6 hours work on, all right, 6 hours times $100. Okay, $600 there. That's good, After you've done it a couple times, you get better at it. Maybe you realize there's a template you can use. There's some shortcuts. Next wedding, it only takes you like 3 hours to put together the same website. But if you're charging by the hour, you can only charge for 3 hours. Whereas, your worth and your skill was at least established at the 6-hour rate, but you can't do that anymore. Charging by the hour tends to penalize journalists or creative professionals who are really good at what they do because they're more efficient, they know the stuff, they're more familiar. Fine if you're starting out, things like that. So that's something to keep in mind. So, okay, do you charge a flat rate? Okay, 6 hours I've established. Maybe I'll charge the 8-hour rate, and that gives me some wiggle room in there as well. So you're covered for a relatively complex website, and that, hey, advantage you. If you've charged the equivalent of 8 hours to do this job, and you get it done in 4 hours, woohoo! You're off celebrating St. Patrick's Day, because you're ahead, or you've found time to get paid to go up and find the next job, or things like that. So you booked a solid thing. But what happens if you encounter a bridezilla or a Groomosaurus rex? I learned that was the male equivalent of a bridezilla, just to be fair here. So you encounter a Groomosaurus rex who doesn't like the pictures. They come back to you again and again asking for tweaks after tweaks. Suddenly that 8-hour job turns into 12 hours, 14 hours of revisions and all that stuff, and you're losing money. How do we handle that? We sort of talked about it earlier. How do you handle those things?
Contract.
Boom. Yeah. Getting it in there as well. We saw that in that look at that Canadian Freelance Union contract. You want language that protects you. Just like my bathroom contractor had language that protected him when I realized we didn't clarify we wanted tiles on all the walls. If a good contract lets you charge additional fees if your client demands changes beyond the scope of what you agreed to. So spell out the term of the deals, what you'll do, what you'll provide. There's got to be a give and take, as with anything. You'll do something, they'll vet, they'll come back for changes. That's normal, but you've got to spell out what a normal back and forth might be. How many edits will you do, etc. So I still haven't answered the question, what should I charge? Because this is tricky. Now, the top rate many writers aspire to, $1 a word. If you're charging by the word, that's considered really great. Some places pay, though, as little as 10 cents a word. More realistic bottoms, 35 cents a word, adding for all these things. Many places, though, publish their rates. There are also numerous groups, even some unions, that are out there that try to provide information about freelance rates. I've tried to pull together a number of these links and put them on Blackboard for you as well. And you'll find out with freelancers, knowledge is power, and there are resources where freelancers share this information back and forth. Just like the Canadian Freelance Union there is giving some help and offering some help with writing contracts. You can find some things here. I want to go to a US website to give you an example of what I'm talking about, something called the Editorial Freelancers Association. These are American prices. We'll go to their website right now. As it loads, perhaps I should have done that, editorial rates. This was a survey of members done April 2020, so 2 years ago, asking members to volunteer about projects they invoiced or collected payments. So give you a sense of what freelance rates. Again, US dollars, so at a premium here as well. Coaching, consulting, median rate per hour, copy editing, fixing, $41, $45 an hour, $46.50 an hour. Curriculum development, layout, project management, proofreading, or word charges. So you get a sense, 10 cents. These aren't very lucrative at this point. There's a medium pace of work, how many take, things it can take here as well. I want to give you another one. This is Peak Freelance, Peak Freelance is a freelancing. It offers a membership that's rather a paid thing, but it gives freelance advice and job boards, as you say here. It does cost. Let me click on this just to give you a sense. Peak Performance. Wait for the website to load. All access member. Blah 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 blah. What's it actually give you? Bonus crash courses in writing, Slack channels, data library, town halls. Anyway, it's like a paid support group for freelancers and leads for things. But freelance writing rates, how much to charge? New data for 2022. So again, it's surveyed as well. Freelancers over, some are pulling in 100K US. They've been writing for over 2 years. For a $1,500 Word blog post, $250 to $399 US is the most popular rate. A white paper is a briefing thing, a private thing if you're doing private work, ghostwriting. Most popular pricing model is per project. And look at this, word of mouth referrals are the biggest sources of high paying freelance writing gifts. I've included this in Blackboard. Let me just drop it there for you as well to take a look at that. A couple other things I want to show. Who pays writers? Oh, a couple other highlights from this Peak Freelancers to give you an idea. They mentioned that Politico, the U.S. politics website, pays a flat rate $500 per article in the 2,000 word range, about 25 cents a word. Bridal Guide pays $1,000 for a 2,000 word article, $1 per word. So you'll learn about these things by consulting and looking around. This is another crowdsourced group, whopayswriters.com. And this is where writers share what they're getting. So you have a sense going in. Paid in 15 days, Eater. So let's look at, Architect Magazine, anything. Let's go down randomly and pick Forbes. 6 cents a word for a 1,200 word feature, medium reporter, ongoing pre-existing relationship with editor or publication. So you're not going to walk in the door, but, and it talks about the rights that are going. $2 a word for a 3,000 word profile or interview. Heavy investigative reporting. So suddenly a huge range for what they're going to charge for a little feature, maybe shows up on their website, versus a well-investigated piece, $200 a word, paid in a month, but you need a relationship, that building of relationships. So this can be useful. Like Fox News Travel, curious, cold pitch, no pre-existing relationships, 17 cents a word, US. Did I see? No. Anyway, those are links out there as well. How about the Canadian equivalent? Again, this link is also on Blackboard. Who pays Toronto writers? This is a weird website. It's a GitHub open source thingy, but it's what I could find. Pages listed alphabetically. BlogTO, no set freelance rate, but about $50 to $150 per piece. Suddenly that $300 an article is looking really good. But BlogTO, you visit a bubble tea shop in Scarborough that hasn't been pitched before. You could write up something about that. Canada Land, $200 for their freelance things. Canadian Business, CBC Opinion, Chatelaine. This gives you some sense of some Canadian ones to take a look at. Hint, Toronto Life, at least $1 for a word, or online articles different there as well. Newspaper. So resources here. You'll find all these. Let me drop this again in the chat. Again, it's a weird looking It's a GitHub, which is a sharing website for open source code. I don't know why it's on there, but hey, it's a resource. I'll share it. So that's where we're at. Now, some places have tried to standardize rates, as I mentioned, through unions. Another big union out there is the Canadian Media Guild. It's a union I used to be a member of at CBC, and it actually offers protection for CBC freelancers. Which means if we hear from Bruce Sellery next week, he does freelance work for CBC. He is covered by this. If you listen to Shares Dosh or any of the contributors you often hear on the morning, Metro Morning or things, they're covered by this. They have regular appearances. They come up. You do pay a fee to the guild, but union dues, of 1.55% deducted from your payments to a maximum of the year. And it just gives you some protection, and it sets out the rules. This was both protecting full-time employees at CBC, so that their jobs weren't contracted out to freelancers all the time, but it also gave some protection for freelancers. The general rule of thumbs, though, is that if you had the choice between doing a job as a full-time employee and doing a job as a freelancer, you're going to make more on a per-job basis as a freelancer. You don't have the overhead attached with you. And it's, a full-time employee and a freelancer doing the same job, it can be expected that on a daily per hourly basis, that freelancer is making way more per hour. Or at the end of the day for that. You've got a full-time job, someone is paying your dental benefits, and you don't have to worry about the hustle the next day because you have a job to come back to as well. So they compensate that flexibility by paying that a little bit more. Things to keep in mind. So I've got those links. Any questions with that? Still haven't answered the question, what should you charge? But as you say, it's complicated. It involves doing some work, what you want to do. We've given some resources to look to figure out what's available there and what you can look out for. So again, figuring out rates. I think I've gone through these things. Let's talk taxes. Anyone filed theirs this year yet? I might have some more time next week, maybe. We'll see. Yes, you have said. Yeah, as a student, I filed my taxes the minute I could, just because of my budget. I had nothing left to spend, and I needed the refund, because you do get to claim tuition, and there are many tax benefits to being a student in there as well. So I would encourage, if you haven't, that's something to do this weekend. Get the money back in your pocket as soon as possible. So we have talked about positioning yourself, getting your resources in gear, figuring out what you need to charge. Freelancers don't face the same tax deadline as the rest of us. I believe freelancers have until June to file. But again, with any tax advice I give you, check with someone who knows what they're talking about. I'm providing a bit of an overview with some of these, and we can spark up conversations. What do you need to know from a legal and tax perspective to freelance? Freelancers are running their own business, so you have to think like you are running your own business. Do you need to fill out a form to declare, I, Mike Wise, MA freelancer, I, Tim O'Shaughnessy, I, Gabriel or Elizabeth Warner, MA freelancer? Do you need to fill out that form and get the card? No. You can freelance and bill everything under your own name. When you write a contract, the contract is with, Mike Wise. It's with Elizabeth Warner. It's with whatever. You don't have to open a business account yet. Don't try to be clever. Elizabeth, when you start your freelance career, don't call yourself Elizabeth Warner Incorporated yet, because that actually means something. Just go by your own name. And don't call it, like Coffee Mug Productions or something like, because you just had a coffee mug in the shot there. It might seem clever, but what happens when you go to the bank with a check that says pay to Coffee Mug Productions $1,500, and you're like, hi, I'm Elizabeth Warren. And they're like, this says it's to Coffee Mug Productions. What are you going to do? You have to set up a business account for Coffee Mug Productions. And then the minute you set up a business account, you've got to register the business and get into all things. So when starting out, keep it simple. Freelance under your own name. For starters. Don't add INC after it, which stands for incorporated. That actually means something. That's when you take your freelance business to the next step and incorporate yourself. Does anyone know the difference between one thing and the other? Tim was nodding his head. Elizabeth, I don't know if that was a head nod or just no. Okay. Stop picking on me, Mike. I'm going to turn my camera off. But did you want to?
Yeah, it's just setting yourself up as a business, like a corporation kind of thing. So it's you have a incorporated number through the government of Ontario and have a business account, and it's not going directly to you. It's going through this business, which is also having expenses and everything like that.
Yeah, it is setting your business up as a legal entity that is separate from you. That means if, God forbid, something goes wrong with the business can be sued or face damages or something like that, and it's separate from you, as opposed to you. So if you're taking out any loans or anything like that, for that you would be personally responsible for those loans. A legal entity, there's a measure of protection there. Any assets you have as a person are separate from the business. Likewise, any assets for the business should be separate from what you have there. So it's a way to set up a company as a legal entity, gives you some legal protection, distance from lawsuits, also lets you start paying other people, paying them benefits, getting into benefit packages, gives you some legal protection, as I mentioned, gives you some tax benefits, particularly around the GST, the HST, GST, it's all complicated, as it comes around there. You can deduct more expenses with this as well. If you ever get to the point where you can expand, it's easier to take on employees and expand. You can pay them benefits down the road, but starting out, don't worry about that. Don't worry about it yet. If you do a lot of freelance work, incorporating yourself might be something you want to consider. And I hope in a couple of weeks, if we get the chance to talk to some freelancers, we can talk to them specifically about these sort of questions. It actually requires a lot of work. To incorporate, you do need, yes, you can do it online yourself, but it's usually good to get a lawyer. It can cost anywhere from $1,000 to $3,000 to incorporate your business, get a business number, go through all the checks and balances, have a legal person go, yep, nope, you're set up. This entity, Mike Wise Inc., is different from Mike Wise. There are online services that can do it cheaper if you don't want go through a lawyer. If it's relatively simple and you're using forms, you can save some money. Again, Google's your friend. You'll figure some of these things out. You can do it yourself, but it is a lot of work, a lot of forms to figure out, things to file. You also need a GST or an HST number, but we'll talk about that in a second. Let's talk taxes in Canada. When do you have to start paying taxes as a freelancer?
Depends who you ask.
Well, yeah.
Never.
When do you legitimately pay taxes as a freelancer? And we'll just take honest answers only. The honest answer is anytime you make freelance income, you're obligated to pay taxes to it. Even if it's just $50 you got for something, you've got to pay taxes. That's why it's important to keep track of your income and your expenses for the Canada Revenue Agency, the CRA. The rules may be different if you're going to be based out of other countries, etc. I'm just giving tax information for Canada at this point. You want to keep your physical and digital receipts. Hint, Tim, filing cabinet. You must hold on to them for 6 years under Canadian law. That means the CRA could come back to you for 5 years in the future and ask to prove why you made a claim. You'll need to keep the records. Oh, I don't know. Maybe that's a reason to print things out and keep them physically in a filing cabinet.
Okay, in my defense,
lest you have your laptop stolen and lose all your tax information around.
I do have 3 years of invoices and check receipts, but if you saw my filing system, you would be even angrier than you are now. So go avoid that one.
Okay, so taxes in Canada. Operate under your own home starting out. Don't add INC after your name yet. When you're ready, you can look at incorporating a business. It costs money, as I mentioned. May involve getting a lawyer. When do you need to start paying taxes as a freelancer? Once you learn any income, okay. This is the form you need to fill out. Reporting self-employed income if you're not incorporated. The T2125 form. statement. I actually will have to fill this out this year as well for some freelance work I did in November. So I will do that. If you have incorporated your freelance business because you have set up a total separate entity, you actually have to file separate personal and business taxes, a T1 and a T2 that go through there. And it may be that your business pays Mike Wise Inc. pays Mike Wise a regular salary, or you're pulling from, or something like that. But it adds to the complexity. This, you can do your own taxes. You might want to consider a bookkeeper if it gets to something complicated this way. This is why many freelancers get a bookkeeper. There are bookkeepers and tax experts that specialize and help out other freelancers. We'll talk about networking. This is where it helps to talk to other people. You meet someone. Hey, can I ask your advice? Who do you use to do your books? Are they good? Are they familiar with this? Word of mouth. This is what happens. Very important not to spend all your money. As we mentioned, the rule of thumbs is set aside at least 30%, probably more, for your income for taxes, HST, as well as Canada Pension Plan contributions. That can be as much as $5,700 yearly, depending on how much you earn. So, as you're freelancing, you are required to not only pay taxes, but set aside money for your future. That's, hard in the short term. You'll be glad in the long term that you're forced to spend some money. That's outside of any optional RRSP, TFSAs you're doing. But let's be realistic. You're also paying off student loans at this point. Federal tax rates are between 15 to 33%, depending on your net income, and provincial tax rates differ based on your province or territory. Depending on where you freelance, you might even have freelance dues. But let's talk the GST or the HST. It differs across the country. The GST is called the HST in Ontario because it's a harmonized sales tax. What is the HST in Ontario? Percentage.
13.
13%. What's it in Alberta?
11.
Yeah, I think it's only 5.
Alberta
Alberta does not have a provincial. Yes, 5.
I thought it was crazy when I thought that.
Resident Alberta expert. Yeah, 5%. Yeah, with an exclamation mark. I bet you miss it. Yeah, that's what anyone from Alberta says. There's no provincial tax in Alberta because oil. Whereas everyone else, we've harmonized it. So it's HST and GST are used interchangeably, but depending on where you live and end up, let's all move to Alberta then. Yeah. Not gonna do. Okay, so the question: when do you need to start collecting GST/HST as a freelancer? The goods and service tax or the harmonized sales tax?
Once you've incorporated.
Yeah. So how they should be. So say, okay, I will build that website for you for $1,500. When does it have to be $1,500 plus HST? It's not when you incorporate, only once you start making more than $30,000 a year. So if you're doing one or two $1,500 websites, you don't have to worry about it. You can charge $1,500. If you are building websites for people outside of Canada, don't have to worry about it. Especially if you're using, it would be complicated with that freelance app that Andrea was talking about. If all your clients are outside, it might be some tax input outside of Canada. There might be some real nice tax implications for that. You don't have to charge them HST. Of course, if you're doing one or two jobs on that, you don't have to charge HST. Otherwise, I won't advise. I'll advise you about paying taxes on what you do earn there. So if you make more than $30,000, it gets a bit more complicated and there's more paperwork you need to do. First, you need to apply to the federal government for something called an HST or GST number to track your remittances. If you ever, now that you know about it, you'll probably see contracts and they'll include a GST or an HST number on them. And that's just how you know it's, being collected properly and going around. So you would charge that surcharge and whatever you do. You do not get to pocket that extra money. It should go into its own savings account, or just make sure you know that that's not money for you to touch. Create a separate savings account, because once a year you're going to have to take that and pay that money to the federal government as the HST that you collected. Now, in Ontario. So we'll do that there. Don't spend it, set it aside. The one advantage to charging HST is you can claim it on expenses. And this is why many freelancers, even though they don't reach that $30,000 threshold, still charge the HST. There's a, it kind of looks professional. Do you want people to know, oh, this person's just starting out? They get one or two websites a year and they haven't charged me HST. It's a way of going, I'm starting out and I don't make enough in my freelance world to charge HST. But if it is like, oh, okay, I'm dealing with a legit business, they are charging HST. The thing about the goods and service tax, if you have a degree in economics and understand tax policy, blah, 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 the advantage and the reason a GST was brought in was in the name of efficiency, blah, 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 blah. The whole idea that a business might pay a GST, but it could also claim any tax it pays coming in. So technically, if you are charging the HST as a freelancer, come tax time, you can add up all the GST you have spent on things like a new computer, or a new desk or printer, and keep track of the HST you paid for things related to your business and claim it on the other side. Big asterisk, that's my understanding of it. Please consult a tax expert about that as well. That's my understanding of how this works. We'll talk in a second about claiming other sort of business expenses, but that's why it can be worth it to charge an HST, or once you get to the point of doing that, you're consulting a lawyer. A lawyer, show me a lawyer that isn't making more than $30,000 a year. Lawyers charge HST on the work that they do as well. You could deduct the HST you paid on those lawyer fees if you were collecting the HST as you charge your clients. So there is a reason to consider this. It makes it more complicated, of course, going forward. Let's talk expenses, and this is where I put a caution on everything I say. I'm not the expert. You want to do more research without this, but the Canadian Tax Code does let you claim some business expenses to lower your taxable income. That means if you are making $30,000 freelancing, but you can prove that you spent $4,000 on your business, renting a place or certain expenses and things like that, you can deduct that $4,000 from the $30,000 and only pay taxes on the $2,600. That's what it means to claim expenses. You're trying to reduce the amount you've done. They're not stupid. You can't say, well, I made $30,000, but I had expenses of $120,000. It doesn't work like that. You need to spend money. Unless you're Donald Trump, it doesn't work like that. You can lower your taxable income by claiming some business expenses. What does that include? Advertising. So if you want to advertise your freelance service, money you spend on that, you can claim. That's business development things. Business fees, professional dues. So joining that freelancer union, that's a total legit professional expense. Bank fees. Dealing with the bank, that monthly service fee they give you, that's rent, not your personal rent, rent for, say, an office space or a WeWork space you do for your freelance. It gets complicated when you try to claim a bit of the rent in the place you're working. We can talk about that. Office supplies. So paper for the printer, Tim. You can keep track, file your physical receipt for the paper you bought for your printer. And hey, still not? Yeah. Telephone and utilities. If your phone is your work phone and it's a legit work phone expense, you can claim that. If it's your personal phone, that's something, you'll need to get professional experience, advice, whether people have two phones for that, they're claiming one there as well. Travel and entertainment. How many times have you gone out with people like, can I have the bill? Because I can claim this. We talked business. When you entertain someone or take someone out for a dinner and talk in terms of networking or something, you can deduct half of that cost, like what the person ate, not alcohol. This is, an expense that's used in business, and a number of other people will do this. You need to keep good records in case you're ever audited to explain you do that as well. Now, working from home, the rules are different. You can claim a portion of your home office, but not your whole house. Well, I pay $1,800 a month rent, so I'll claim that. Well, no, not if it includes the place where you sleep. You need to get into a complicated thing of, okay, if I've got a 1,000 square foot apartment and this small corner is 200 square feet and that's designated as my office, then that's 20% of your rent you can claim at home. That's how claiming a portion of your home office works. It's complicated. Get advice before you do that as well. If you rent a full-blown office and it's not where you sleep, then yes, by all means, that is a business expense that can be claimed there as well. So can you claim the printer that you bought, Tim? You're nodding.
You can claim the HST on the printer.
You can claim the HST on it as well. It gets complicated. When you get a printer should give you many years of service. A printer, desk, furniture, new computer, new laptop, camera, the government doesn't let you write that off in the first year. Or you could have a scenario where you're like, I freelanced one article, I made $1,000, but I incurred $6,000 in business expenses. Please give me $5,000 back, Canada Revenue Agency. It doesn't work like that. That is considered a capital asset, and you're actually given several years. You're given 7 years. You can depreciate it, they say, over 7 years. Manufacturing companies do this. If they, there's Alliston, the Honda plant is investing in brand new equipment for it will be able to depreciate the cost of any expense over 7 years over taxes. Same thing with you. If you buy a laptop, budget for whatever you spent and divide by 7. And each year you can slowly claim that. Again, that's a rough idea how it works. Get professional tax advice before you take my advice in doing that. But that's how longer things work. And that's why you can't, rack up $6,000 in fees. There is something called a business startup expenses. If you're just getting started, if you need to pay initial expenses like local business taxes, if you're renting a space, those are deductible in the first year. But furniture, computers, none of that falls into that there. Any questions on that? I don't know if I can answer much more, but that's a rough view. You can claim travel if it's related to your job. If you need to take an Uber to get to someone to interview them, keep the receipt. Or save it to your file and save it to your hard drive, Tim.
You get email receipts from Uber, so it's really
email receipts. So that's easy. I wouldn't print that. Don't kill a tree for that. But make sure you can't write off your daily trip to Starbucks. However, if you are meeting with the source or meeting with something and you pick up their coffee, you can claim their coffee, not your own. But this is why, if you've ever seen freelancers, their wallets are about 5 times thicker than anybody else because they have saved every receipt and have run out of time to go through and qualify and file away all that stuff. One day I'll get around to it, or they'll write on the back, took Bruce for coffee and claimed it and did things like that. You can't claim your vacation unless you figure out some way to write it and turn it into a business expense. So yeah, hey, I'll go with my friends to, Alberta for the weekend, but hey, I'll write a travel escape story or something. Then you can do that. Lots more you can get into it. Something to research to get into that as well. Okay, let's pivot for the last little bit. How do we actually find freelance work? And this gets back to the idea of networking. You do need to get out there, drum up your business. It means reaching out to places who will hire you, introducing yourself, letting them know, hey, I'm available for hire. Figuring out how they work, what they're looking for, and how you can present ideas to them. There are resources and places to start and talking to people, wherever you're doing, but it means just like as you figure out your job to be done and what you want to do, identify places you might want to work and reach out to them. What are some other skills you can sell to other places and worry about that. This is where it takes that don't feel nervous doing that as well. I'm reminded of the dating advice my dad gave me in high school. He said, don't be afraid of calling someone. They're probably just as nervous as you are. And editors who deal with freelancers are used to this. They are familiar. They are part of their job. It is their job. They need writers. Look at this old guy. They need a roster of people they can call upon to get their job done. So don't feel nervous about calling up someone at Toronto like, hey, I'd like to want to know what your freelance policies are. What are you looking for? What could I do? Start that relationship if you want to do some writing for Toronto Life. Get to know the actual name because it's in their interest to get to know you as well. Which leads me to not only the second piece of advice my dad gave me. They're not going to call you if they don't know you exist. That's also the plot of every 1980s teen movie. Oh my God, that person doesn't know I exist. It's Molly Ringwald's entire career was based on being the wallflower that was afraid that someone didn't know she existed. It's the same thing. You got to get out there. That's why we've been talking about getting a sense of who you are, who you want to be as a journalist, who you want to market yourself, what the thinking is in there, and getting out and doing that as well. So it's okay even to DM someone to get the ball rolling. Hi, I'm Molly Ringwald, a freelance writer. She's been following your work for a while. I just want to say hi, see if you have any commissioning stories at the moment. If sir, anything particular looking for, either way, glad to meet you. Hope to work with you on something sometime. You can DM, you can reach out, do an email, drop it, call them up. Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily stalk them at the Starbucks near the office with a basket of fresh goods to, things like that. But just like in dating, you want to reach out to people who are available. Don't waste your time on the marrieds. Find out who is available. Unless, we won't go there. Take some research finding the right person. Yeah, it's no use like spending all your time trying to reach one person and then it's go, actually, I don't deal with freelancers, but thank you for the basket of goods. Take some research, find out who the right people are, reach out to people who are available. Come up with a proper name. Don't send a pitch in to whom it may concern. That is not good. You should be more precise, especially when it comes to pitching and coming out of that. An idea we've talked about in plenty of courses. You're no doubt heard of this as well. Something we all need to work on continually. Part of that involves having a great story idea. It also involves understanding what the outlet you're pitching is looking for. Your job as a freelancer is to not only come up with a compelling story, but also present it in a compelling way to the right commissioning editor so that that person gives you the go-ahead to work on it. It's a moving piece. You always know that to Rob, if it was a good story, he was going to give you the go-ahead because Rob has to, approve stories to get onto the website. That's great. There's more moving pieces in the freelance world. And that's why relationship building is important. The more that person knows who you are, like, oh yeah, okay, yeah. Okay, I get that idea. Yeah, okay, see where you're going. Yeah, sure, let's go with that. You've done this with me before, or I've seen your stuff. It's about relationship building, so you do that. You want to try to remove all the reasons an editor might say no to a story and give them reasons to say yes. So we've covered some of the elements of a good pitch as well. Has it been done before? No use going for that $150 blog TO freelance rate for the bubble tea shop you visited in Scarborough if it's already been profiled on the website. Has it been done before? Don't pitch a topic, pitch a story. Don't just say, hey, Toronto Life, I'd really like to write about Tibetan cuisine. No, I'd like to write about a former Hamilton welder who opened a Tibetan food truck after he lost his job. It's a compelling story. Fine, you're making all this up here as well. Why now? Why is this timely? Don't pitch a Wikipedia article, a history of Tibetan food in Canada. Wikipedia doesn't pay, neither does most freelancers for a story like that. What is the big picture? How to connect it with a deeper truth, a larger picture, add some context to show what matters. Why you? Why you, not another writer? This is getting back into authority, personal branding. What is the name you want to make for yourself? What are you doing to stay on top of this area of expertise you can demonstrate? Again, hard starting out there as well, but that's okay. You can still approach it with this as well. Then keep your pitch concise and go along. Explain the steps you've taken to further a story. If you have an interview scheduled, great. Practice makes purpose. As mentioned, there are plenty of freelance organizations you can look into to help you identify potential leads, talk to others, hustle on your own to find other potential employers. Any question about that? We're in the home stretch here. Okay, because I do have what I have call the pitching letter assignment to talk about. Another assignment I'd like to do. The good news is you've already done a lot of work on this to begin with. In Lara's class, you've already worked on a query letter for the, yes, the cat realizes too. You've already worked on a query letter for that service assignment you've done for her. What I'd like you to do is revisit that query letter you wrote for her in long form journalism, you know, where you sort of pitched why you should do this particular story and you wrote it to her. I want to see that. Make any improvements that she suggests or you want on it, or as your story has evolved, do that. But then I'd like you to, after you update it, revise it based on feedback, do at least one more pitch letter tailored to a different publisher for whatever you're working on in long form journalism. Now, there's reasons why you might want to publish or pitch to someone else. And there's a couple reasons with this. One is, you know, well, you do have the option of resubmitting the original story to a new publisher. Tailor that letter to the new outlet. So say you pitch to, you know, Toronto Life and they didn't bite on it, but you think it's a good story. So then you maybe might pitch to Maclean's. What you don't do is pitch to Maclean and Toronto Life at the same time. That's considered bad form. Because what happens if both say yes? You got to let one down. Alternatively, what you can do is pitch an alternative treatment using some of your research. Hey, I'm already working on this one story for Lara, Toronto Life. You know what? There was one interview that was kind of interesting. I could develop into a whole other thing, and maybe Maclean's would be interested in that. Or maybe Wired Magazine. You can look beyond. I've given you links for many U.S. magazines and sources and other places you can find some of these things out. You have to be quiet, cat. You can pitch to a different publisher, preferably in a different market. You know, the editor of Maclean's and Toronto Life, they're in the same building. They might not look to, you know, if it's pretty close, you might be burning a bridge. I would not recommend pitching anything remotely similar at the same time in there. Doesn't mean you can work back and forth. But different markets, you might have a bit more freedom with some things like this. Or different treatments. You can't sell the same story twice, but there's nothing stopping you from selling a version in Canada, figuring out a different treatment. Not the same piece, because there are intellectual property rights, and also you'll develop a reputation of someone selling the same story twice and not doing work. You want a different treatment, a different story. You can use some of the same of the research, maybe not the same quotes, but find something. I've seen some of you file stories for Humber News where you've done that. You've had one really good interview and you've squeezed it out into two stories with the same expert in there. God noticed you've done that. So I've included some other pitching and freelance guides on Blackboard there as well. I would also, as part of this assignment, like you to get a sense of what kind of contract you'd be willing to sign in exchange for the article. I've given a document here, and this I provided this link here as well, but maybe I'll go back and also add that that link on the Canadian Freelance Union, because that was also useful. Yeah, this is taking a while to load. I might, let me drop this in the chat so we have it here. I might revise the assignment to include a link to this. I'd just like you to give me an idea of what kind of contract you'd be willing to sign in exchange for your article. You don't have to write an entire article out. Think of this as reflection on a contract, not writing up a contract. I'm only looking for your sense of, if I was to go ahead with this, here's what I would be willing to do. I just want to see your thinking in terms of delivery, penalties, how many edits you're working on there. What terms and conditions would you expect to see? What's the timeline for completion? How are you handling edits? What expenses might you incur and would you want back? What are your intellectual property rights? And most important, what rate would you charge or expect to be paid? And why? And I do want you to back that up with research. I think this article that I'm writing for Lara's class, if it got published, could generate this much money for me, and here's the reason why. And if you've been paying attention, I think I've left the breadcrumbs around for you to do a bit of research to figure that out as well. And this is just a reflection. So what to hand in? Due April 13th. Fingers crossed. That is subject to change based on what happens, of course. And, would I be starting on this before 12:01 tomorrow? No, but things to keep in mind. And when there's a settlement, things will be falling into place rather quickly. This is something you could knock off early. Knowing that when we come back, it'll be a scramble to finish the assignments in your other classes. So it's worth 12% of your final grade. What to hand in. So that pitch letter number 1, you've already done this. You need to revise it and put it on there as well. Please act on any feedback you received. Pitch letter number 2, don't just copy and paste what you've done. This is to be a different publisher. I want it, not a to whom it may concern, but to do some research to figure where it is. Pitch it for that. Tell me a bit, why have you gone after, American Furniture Whittler magazine? Why do you think they're going to be a good fit for whatever you're working on? And then, of course, 2 to 3 paragraph reflection on your contract rights and the rate you'd expect. So don't be frightened by the contract. I'm not looking for a legal contract. Having reviewed this just to demonstrate that you've thought through what's going on with that. Any questions? And you're all like, yeah, I'm going to start this right away, Mike. Yeah, but any questions? All right. Well, that is great. I can stay if there's any last minute questions. Fingers crossed for your salary personal branding. Likely 11:30 at 11:45. We'll change the time, but I will send out a Blackboard notice if this is still on. I'm really hoping it's coming in, and we can also start talking summer and election strategy going forward. So, if no other questions, that's all I got. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you next week, hopefully.
Yeah.
Hopefully, yes.
See ya. Bye.
Thank you.
Okay.